I would say one of my automotive confessions is every single Euro car I've ever owned has had broken headlight clips. And I fixed it by using zip ties. And then the bumpers would get loose. So I used zip ties for that too. And then the skid plates would get loose. So I zip tied those too. Pretty much the entire front end of any European car that I've owned thus far has been held entirely together with the confidence of my mechanical skill set and zip ties.
On my 98 Eclipse, I decided to buy a front lip off of eBay. Said front lip came with self-tapping screws. On the weekend I decided to install that lip. I spent a good amount of time making sure everything was leveled up, making sure it sat right, making sure everything was flush. And I self-tapped it into the underside of my brand new painted bumper. A week later at Automotion, I took a wrong turn in traffic and hit a large dip in the road and tore said bumper off.
Once while installing coilovers on my Focus ST, I needed to remove the windshield wipers. So I used a screwdriver and it immediately cracked my windshield. And then I found out I didn't need to remove the windshield wipers.
The first car I ever drag raced was a PT Cruiser, the SRT version, which doesn't make it any better other than the fact that I drag raced a PT Cruiser as my first vehicle ever.
A week and a half ago, I picked up this girl and I was like, hey, check out my Lexus. It's sick, right? So we were whipping and we were coming back by the shop and I was like, oh, let's go to this construction zone. It'll be fine, right? It's like 4 inches off the ground. Also, I was like, bam, bam, bam. I was like, oh my God, what happened to my car? And I get outside and my bumper's cracked. And I was so sad, dude. It literally sucked so much.
So pretty much the whole time I had my Mitsubishi down at college, it was just a real bad time overall. There was one time where I was backing out of the parking lot at our dorm, and a few weeks beforehand, I was like, dang, it makes some kind of weird noises when I turn the wheel, but I thought nothing of it. And as I was backing out of the parking spot a few weeks later, my entire lower ball joint failed. And the car was sitting on the ground because the wheel was no longer attached to the rest of the car.
Right after getting my '99 Mustang GT, I took it to the car wash, got it nice and clean, and I ripped out of there like a bat out of Not being used to a rear-wheel drive car, I immediately sent it in to a mailbox. And mail was literally flying and raining down, and I destroyed my front bumper. That's a really typical Mustang story.
I remember the first car I ever owned. I spent 45 minutes arguing with my father on how larger ground wire gauging would help the car go faster. Yeah.
After having my Eclipse repainted and put through bodywork with new bumpers and fenders, I decided to take it to school with me. A few months later, after I was pulling out of a parking spot, I decided to turn too sharp too soon and smashed my brand new painted bumper into the side of a curb.
I took off of work one day and decided I was going to plasti dip the wheels of my Cobalt SS. I went all out. I sprayed them two-tone, 2 different colors, black and red. I got done with it and I was like, this looks awesome. And I was like, that was way too much work. And then I just painted the other 3 wheels red.
There was a time that I owned a C5A6 with the 2.7T 6-speed motor and bought the upgraded turbo lines that you could install that were red, because having your piping being a different color than black was a surefire way to make sure everybody knew that your car was faster. Unfortunately, that required sometimes having to do more than the minimal amount of work of replacing hosing on the top of your engine, especially the ones at the bottom next to the turbos where the cracking actually occurred. I never replaced that turbo. I never replaced those hoses, mostly just because I zip tied everything together and was unable to get underneath the car ever again.
I once applied a certain unnamed spray paint type product to my wheels of my Mitsubishi Eclipse. The color was lime green. I decided not to mask off the tires and to paint the wheels while they were still on the car during the middle of winter in my garage. I still find speckles of lime green paint today.
I went to a motorcycle parts store to buy some parts for my motorcycle, and I backed into my spot because it always looks cooler when you back into your spot. And it was kind of on a hill, and as I was leaving, some guys were out front and they're like, "Man, that's a really dope car." I was like, "Thanks, dude." And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, you know, wanted to rev it up and get out of there quick. So I thought I had it in first, but I left it in reverse, and I floored it into the back of a curb and I ripped my diffuser off. And they all just stood there and were laughing, and I just drove away with it dangling on the ground and scraping. And I didn't stop.
I remember taking my Datsun down to Appleton, Wisconsin for a car show, and had heard a small finagle of metal noises in my transmission, to the response of me looking at my transmission and saying, "I'm sure it'll make it." It did not. It blew up at 70 miles an hour with my fiance, now wife, in the passenger seat screaming as to why there was smoke coming out of the middle of nowhere in my car.
I began to have starter issues with my winter E36 that I picked up for a winter beater and daily driver. So the only way to start it was to bring Rhino ramps with me and park them on the ramps and then push start the car off of the ramps.
On my first car, my PT Cruiser, I had a stick-on hood scoop from AutoZone. I wanted to sell the car, so my first thought was to take a screwdriver and pry it off, and it completely ruined the hood.
I once sold a car because of the fact that the brake repair maintenance was so expensive that it made more sense to sell the car and buy the same exact car a second time with new brakes to save the $1,500 difference in price.
One day when it was very cold, I believe it was like -40, I was very excited that the BMW did start that morning. I was so excited, however, that I forgot to make sure that the doors were unlocked after I went inside to let it warm up. The car ran for 4 hours until it ran out of gas.
While installing an intercooler on my Focus ST, one of the brackets, the mounting brackets, I have no idea why, but I wanted to loosen it up after I tightened it. So I went to loosen it and it immediately snapped the head off the bolt. And I was just stuck.